Hello everyone, my name is Walter Ragland and I am the CEO/Creative Director of Creative Media Vault in Tokyo, Japan. And today I would like for you to check out my sweater. This nice, cool character that I designed quite a while back for my book, WildFIRE Legend of the Ryukage Clans, as well as the video games and the other media that I have produced based on that book. So, a very nice, colorful character. Check out his armor, check out his weapons. And what I'm going to be showing you today is how to create one of these. A custom-made Red Dragon Clan laser blade from my books and my games. Cool, right? Okay, so if you are an original content creator who has your own like characters, books, or comics, or video games, and you're looking for a way to kind of market and advertise those characters and help people to start really getting interested in them, then cosplay is a very cheap and effective way to start doing that. So many people may not get into your new books or your media or your novels because they simply don't know the characters or because they don't understand what they actually do. They might see a character on like a t-shirt or a drawing that you've done, but they have no like real physical connection to the character, so that might limit their interest. But when you start building actual weapons or props or armor based on these characters, then you can actually start doing stuff like kind of acting out fight scenes or inviting friends over, and like people will naturally start to have questions. So that's why cosplay is a very good and effective option for marketing and advertising your new brand or whatever project that you're working on. And like I said, I wouldn't be doing this if it cost a lot of cash, so this is actually pretty cheap. Most of the stuff that we'll be using in these builds actually comes from the 100 yen store. So to give you an overview of this weapon, we have a couple of lights down here. So you have the front blade, the middle blade, and we have the pommel, and then we have our little like, I guess our cannon action here. And the switch for this weapon is actually located right here. So I'll be showing you how to build all of that. We're going to be placing the battery pack in this area right here. So we are going to be working with electronics as well. Cosplay is also a very good way to pick up new crafting skills. So that's what we'll be working on. This is the first prototype. I'll be showing you how to make the second prototype, which we will, kind of run through the same process. So I don't want to take too long with the introduction, but if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and don't forget to check out my online store where you can get this cool merch from like all of my games and all of my original creative works. And like we'll go ahead and get started with the build. In my WildFIRE storyline, the Red Dragon Clan is actually an intergalactic criminal organization which is a major threat to the Planetary Council. You can read more about them in the link below this video. Okay, so before we get started, let's take a quick look at the basic tools and material that we're going to be using for this build. So we'll start with this. This is a standard EVA foam or EVA foam. Most of you might just know these as floor mats. So like I got a few of them, like you can get these anywhere, but I got mine from like the 100 yen store or the 100 yen store, which is like basically $1 store. So you should have them, and you can find them basically anywhere. But I picked these up, and they were very cheap. So I got a few different sizes. I got like a 5mm, I believe, and maybe a 2mm, like a thinner version, which is also quite rigid. So we'll be using these for the base of the build, mainly this one for the base and then this one for like adding details and covering. Then I also picked up some of this. This is actually just packing foam. And the reason I got this is because it's kind of luminescent, so we'll be using this to kind of filter our light for the blade. As you can see, this stuff is quite translucent, so it really does allow light to kind of shine through, but keep them all dimming it a little bit and not keeping it too bright. So we're going to use that in our build as well. Now we'll move down to the more essential tools like the cutting tool. So you're going to need a very sharp cutting tool, so like a box cutter. And I recommend keeping a knife sharpener around so that you can just keep on sharpening the same blade instead of having to buy another one. Then we've got like a pair of scissors for cutting out shapes. This is a Dremel, which is a sanding tool that you'll be using to sand out some rough parts of your foam after you cut it. Since we'll be working with electronics, we will need some wire strippers and some wire cutters. as well as some solder and a soldering iron. Next will be our heat gun. So we use this thing for heat forming, this foam over here, and it can also be used for like other types of plastics, but we'll be mainly using it for either heat forming foam or opening up or cutting like little small slits in the foam to make them open. Next, we probably won't use this so much in this particular build though, to be honest. Next we'll need a hot glue gun. And this is also used in conjunction a lot of times with like this contact cement. Now this contact cement is if you're not used to using it, it can be pretty tricky. So you have to apply this contact cement on both sides of whatever you want to stick together. And you have to let it dry for about maybe 2 minutes to 5 minutes depending on how much you put on. Then after that you can stick them together. But once this stuff is stuck together, they call this stuff contact cement for a reason. So it's going to be hard to pull what you just bind it apart, which is one reason why I keep hot glue around, in case hot glue can be kind of is a little bit more forgiving because you can just reheat it if you need to like pull apart something. So we'll be using both of them for these builds. Mainly we'll be using the contact cement for the permanent connections or the permanent seals when it comes to like placing these mats together for the base form, and then we'll be using the hot glue for like more details. All right, next we're going to move on to we'll need some wire, which you can get again like basically at any store, even like at the 100 yen store or dollar store. We'll need some 12-volt batteries. And the reason I'm using 12-volt batteries is because I like to keep my builds a little bit more kid-friendly. So they're going to light up and they're going to be fun, but I don't want anything that kids are going to be running around with, banging on and like potentially explode because it's got too much juice going through it. So and these 12-volt batteries will be connected to this right here. These are LED lights. Now, for my RDC blader build, actually you'll notice that his blades are initially green. However, I couldn't really get the green lights that I wanted. So what I'm going to be using is a clear file that I also picked up at the dollar store or 100 yen shop. And I'm just going to draw my shapes onto this. And then I'm going to use this with the conjunction of this film over here to kind of filter the light and turn it into a green light. Yeah, so that's going to be my cheat for this build. After that, you're going to need, these are like shrink wraps for wire. Keep the connections from being exposed to the elements, so we'll be using those while we're doing our wiring, just to keep our wires safe. Then after that, you just basically need some paint. This is what we're going to be using to kind of seal our foam. This is basically like Plastidip, and we're going to be using this before we spray on any of the other paint, in order to kind of seal our foam in a matte black. And it also turned it into kind of like a little thin rubber, which you can see here. And that will allow us to paint other colors on much easier. And then like we can just kind of go with another mix, whatever mix of paints we want. And after we're finished painting, we're gonna use like some standard lacquer. I should have gotten the matte one. But after finished painting, we can cover it with lacquer to keep the paints from running off and make it more waterproof, and then we're basically going to be done with our build. So that is most of the material that we're going to be using for this build, and like I said, most of them can be picked up from the 100 yen store. These are a little bit pricey, but you can find them you can easily find them anywhere on Amazon or at your home center store. And as I mentioned, I will be putting a parts list in the description. That's where I got all of this stuff. Okay, so those are the parts, and let's get on to the build.
Now, the first part of any cosplay project is sketching out your concept and your design, and which will turn into a template. So this is the concept for this particular build from one of my characters, and this is what it's going to look like when it's cut out. So after I've sketched everything onto my EVA foam, what you'll notice I've done is I've actually kind of separated out the parts. So I've separated the blades from the main body. And you'll also notice that I've labeled where the front blade will be and where the back blade will be. And this is where the LED lights will be. This would be an area for separation, and here's where the battery pack will go. And here's where the wires up to the switch will be. And we've got a little switch area right there with some LEDs for the pommel. And then we have our final LEDs, which will be in the back of the blade.
So after you've traced your pattern onto your paper, you're going to put it down here on your thickest foam, and you're going to go ahead and start tracing it out onto the foam, like so. And then once it's traced out, we can kind of move on to cutting. So once everything is traced onto the foam, then we can go ahead and start cutting it out using our handy dandy box cutter. Make sure this thing is sharp. And you're gonna just kind of make some incisions here and then like bring it all the way down. Try to keep the blade as straight as possible. Don't angle it or go to this side. Now I already have a few of these cut out, so I don't really want to waste an extra piece of foam. Alright, so that's done. What I've done is I've cut out 2 blades of similar size using the exact same pattern. And if you'll notice, I've cut out 2 mirror sides, right? So that's one thing that you have to be careful of. When you're cutting on a single piece of foam, you want to make sure that you have this side and this side, and you want to make sure that they are mirrored so that you can kind of put them together. Otherwise, you're going to have one blade that is like smooth and flat, and the other blade facing this direction with the texture sticking out, which you're going to have to kind of try to sand off later, and it's really kind of mental side to do. So like try to, once you're done cutting on a single piece of foam, flip it over, and then cut the other one out, and you should be fine. Alright, so we have these done finally. So now what we can do is we can move on to the gluing process. Alright, so now that I have both of my parts cut out, what I want to do is I want to make sure that one, they're mirrored as I mentioned before, and 2, that they are as close in size and shape as possible. You know, so I'm just going to kind of line these up and see how true they are. They're a little bit off, but we can manage that with a Dremel. Alright, but I do want to get them as close as possible before I start like kind of binding them together with this stuff, the contact cement. That's upside down, haha. Alright, so with this stuff. Alright, and so we'll go ahead and start that process. Now, as I mentioned, contact cement can be a little bit of a pain to work with. So I'm going to put both of these guys down on the table. And what I tend to use when I'm working with contact cement is actually this little piece of extra foam that I've cut off, you know, that I'm not going to be using as part of the build. And I use that to spread it because you know, this stuff is a little bit gooey and sticky, which it should be because of the glue. So I'll start with this one over here so you can get a better view. And I'm just going to spread this contact cement on one side. I'm just going to put like one line here. And you know, like there's no like actual science to this per se, but this is the way I do it. And, like just a good amount. And then after that, I'm going to cap it, and I'm going to use this guy to start spreading that cement around. And I want to make sure that I hit all of the edges. You know, just like really quick. That's why this stuff comes in so handy. I love it. So just going to hit all the edges, you know, kind of make sure that it's all over the place. And I mean, I could put these things together with hot glue, but since this is the base of the build, I do want a strong connection between both parts. So I'm just gonna spread it like this. And then after I spread it, I'm not immediately going to try to glue these 2 parts together. I'm not going to try to glue these 2 parts together immediately because I need to let this stuff dry on both sides. So not only do I have to like put this stuff on one side, on one blade, I also have to do it on the other. Right? So blade them 2. And like I said, I'm doing this, like you'll notice I'm doing this on the textured side instead of the flat side because we don't want to have to try to sand all of this stuff off when we want to like get to painting. So let's go ahead and get this guy done. It takes about like maybe 2 to 5 minutes for this to kind of dry, but you don't want it to go completely dry. Otherwise, it's going to be totally useless when you start trying to stick them together. So you want it to be kind of a little bit sticky and tacky, but not wet. Right? Like I said, you have to be careful with this stuff because once the 2 sides come in contact after they're semi-dry, you're not pulling them apart very easily. So a lot of times that can destroy your build. Let's check our blades, and yeah, this is basically the kind of texture we're looking for. Not too dry, a little bit tacky to where it kind of sticks to your finger a little bit. And now we're gonna have to stick these 2 together. Now the thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to go like this because that is going to create a lot of problems, and you're probably going to wind up tearing your foam or having to cut new pieces. So what I recommend doing is you're going to find the edges, and you're going to connect at the edges first, right? I'm going to try to align this first edge like right here. And you don't have to rush this process. As a matter of fact, I recommend that you don't rush this process. right? Especially if your project has a lot of edges. So I'm just gonna connect everything slowly, going edge by edge, right? Edge by edge, and then like right here. Okay, so I'm lining up these, lining up these, lining up these, right? So that's the top half all connected, and then I can kind of press it down, right? And form it up here. Next, I'll be doing these. Okay, so once the top edges are like kind of lined up, the bottom ones become much easier, and here we go. Yay! One thing I like to do with my build actually is I need to put something a little bit strong in here, so I'm gonna get a chopstick. Now if you'll notice, the inside of this is actually kind of flimsy, so what I'm gonna do is like really kind of wobbly up here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a chopstick, and I'm going to like stick this chopstick down in here, right? I'm going to shove this chopstick in here to make it a little bit more rigid, right around there, and then like so that's good enough, and then I'm gonna break it off right there. And now that the chopstick is in here, I'm gonna put these two together, and we're good. Right, so now that we've got these things glued together, you're gonna see there's a little bit of uneven edge right here, and maybe like right here, right around here. So we're just going to cut these off like so, and like kind of true everything up. So cutting around the circle. Edges that are like really like that you really don't want to try to cut. For these edges, that's what the Dremel tool is for. So I'm gonna sand these out using the Dremel tool. Okay, so now we're going to start working on the actual blades, or the cutting edges of the blades. And we're just going to trace, the outlines out onto EVA foam, the outlines that we got from our template. And we're going to trace these out on a thick EVA foam first. And just kind of, cut everything just like we did before. And this part of the video was sped up, so I'm not really working that fast, for safety purposes. Yeah, so pretty standard stuff here. And then once you have one blade cut out, you can go ahead and move on to the other ones. So you want to make sure that you have both the front and the back blade cut, so you can put them onto the main body. Alright, so now we have both halves of our front and back blade cut out. So before we get to gluing these together with contact cement, another good thing to do right now is to go ahead and get your file or whatever, and go ahead and trace a pattern on to the clear file. And I'm using a green one because I couldn't find the green light that I wanted. So I'm just going to trace a pattern on here, and then I'm going to go ahead and start cutting it out with a pair of scissors. And once everything is cut out, I'm going to move on to this translucent white foam. And I'm going to take the shapes that I just cut out and put them on the translucent white foam and kind of just trace them out as well. And nothing too difficult here. And then once these have been properly traced out, I'm going to get my scissors and I'm going to cut out these shapes as well. So now I should have all of my shapes cut out for my two blades. And so that's the green file as well as the translucent foam. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the base shape onto a piece of thinner EVA foam, maybe about like 3 millimeters. And once it's traced, I'm going to go ahead and cut that out, just like we always do, using our cutting tool. And just kind of go around the edges, try to make it, match the base shape that you've already made as much as possible. And there we go. And you'll do the same thing for the other side, for the opposite side. Make sure that they're both mirrored. So now that we have all of our foam parts cut out for the blade and the body, we're going to go ahead and glue the front blade pieces together using contact cement, just as we've done before with the base. And then we'll stick them together, starting with the edges first to make sure that everything lines up as much as possible. We then do the same thing for the back blade.
And once you put the two halves of the front blade together, you're going to draw a groove line on the foam, and this is where you're going to place your lights. Start cutting along the groove line until you reach about the middle of the foam. You don't want to go all the way through, just like try to keep it to about half of the foam. And go ahead and trace around the groove line as much as possible. And then we're going to wind up cutting this at an angle in a little bit, in order to kind of keep a little bit more of the blade integrity, even though we're going to be kind of hollowing it out to place the lights inside. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually making two small cut lines close to the center of the foam. Not on the center, I'm actually placing them beside the center on the left and right side of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cut the foam down these two lines, leaving the center line as a kind of spine, just to keep the rigidity of the of this part. We're going to slowly open that up. Be careful while you're cutting, in order to make sure that you don't cut yourself or anything like that. And so I'm just cutting down these little small lines on the side of the center line, and we're going to start to kind of peel those apart. And the reason why we're doing this, like I said, is we're going to try to kind of hollow out a space to put our lights inside. And that's kind of what we're looking for. So if you'll notice, I have these two grooves on each side of the center line, and that is where we're going to place our lights. We're now going to do the exact same thing for the back blade, so go ahead and trace your groove lines and then just get to cutting. Now if you'll notice, this foam build is still pretty flimsy because it doesn't have a backbone. So we're going to fix that by placing a piece of PVC pipe in the middle of this. So we're going to wind up cutting out all of that middle area, just like so. And once this has been cut out, we're going to glue it in with contact cement, just like we always do. So you're going to place contact cement on the inside of the base where you just finished cutting. And you're also going to place contact cement on the actual PVC pipe and just let them dry for a little bit as standard. And, then we're going to stick them together. I then cut out a few small pieces of foam to cover the bottom half of the PVC pipe and make sure that the base has a full fitting form. I then traced the bottom shape of the base and cut out these two pieces to put on both sides of it in order to kind of hide the end of the PVC pipe. So we're just going to cover these with contact cement and stick them to the base form. And that'll give us more of a square base to kind of fit our lights into later. So realistically, we don't want to end up soldering too many LED lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a little small groove in the foam of the front blade, and we're going to remove that part so that our LED lights can actually slide through to the other side. So we're just going to carefully remove this little small part, and we're just going to wind up wrapping our LED lights through from one side to the other. And that also allowed us to get some light to the front of the blade, which will give it a pretty cool effect and an even lighting effect from the back to the front. So there won't be like a little gap between the lights on the left and the right side. So now that we have our gap cut into the front blade, we're just going to run the LED lights down each side of the groove. And now we're going to start gluing our translucent foam to our green file parts in order to create the green light for the blade, the pommel, and also the blaster area of the laser blade. And we're going to glue these on using hot glue instead of contact cement. Hot glue is a lot more forgiving than contact cement. So I'm just going to take, for example, the top part of the pommel, and I'm going to stick a bunch of hot glue on there. And then once I've got that adequately covered with hot glue, I'm going to attach the translucent foam part to it. And this has a pretty good hold, so I don't really have to worry about it being a weak bind or anything like that. Basically, if I'm going to pull these two apart, I have to kind of rip them apart. Now that the pommel base is done, I'm going to do the same thing for each blade side. So I'm just going to hot glue these together. And what's going to happen is once they're glued together, they're going to wind up attaching to the foam blade parts. Just like so. And now I'm going to cut out a little small circle of the translucent foam so that I can attach it to the pommel base and mount the pommel ball. And we'll do that with hot glue, just like so. For the glowing pommel ball, I'm actually using a car freshener that I found again at the 100 yen store. It had the perfect green color that I was looking for, so I just picked it up, and it came in a pack of like 2, which was really convenient. I also traced and cut a square piece of translucent foam for the base of my build, because we're going to use that to filter the green light coming out of the blaster area. Now that we have our blade parts ready, it's time to move on to the electronics. So you'll need your wire, you'll need your LED lights, and you'll need your cutting tools and your wire strippers. In addition to solder and a good old-fashioned soldering iron. Some heat shrink tubes also work well to keep your wires organized. For the front blade, we're basically going to wind up wrapping the LED lights around like this. So they're going to come from one side and through the groove that we cut, and then just wrap to the other side where we can hot glue them down. Now for these type of LED lights, there is a line that you can cut that will allow you to separate them into different shapes and lengths. So once you cut along that line, you can work on stripping the ends of it, where you can kind of see this copper part right there at the very end. And you're going to use your cutting tool to carefully remove the plastic that is covering the copper ends, because those copper ends are what you're going to want to solder to. So don't cut completely through the strip, because you want to make sure that you keep the connectors there for soldering. Now we'll go ahead and prepare our wire. So get your wire cutters and your wire strippers, and let's get to work on that. So you're going to cut a length of wire and cut it kind of long, and then you're going to work on stripping both ends for the positive and negative side of that. And once that's set up, we can move on to the soldering. For soldering, what I do is I just dab a little drop of solder on each of the copper connections, and then I attach the wire, the positive and negative side of the wire later. So I'll do another video on in-depth of how I do my soldering. So once soldering is complete, I'll just do a little quick test of my lights to make sure that the connections are strong and that the lights still work. And then I'll move on to wiring up the other parts of my cosplay build. After the lights for my front blade are completely wired up, I will start attaching them to the foam of the front blade by laying them into the groove that we cut into the front blade on both sides of the center line before. And so I can do that by just removing the back of the lights, and there should be a sticky part back there. And first I'll use that to kind of attach them and run them along the inside of the groove. And then once that is completed, I'll actually use contact cement, or what I'm going to use is hot glue to make sure that they stay in place. And of course I'm going to check to make sure that the lights are still working. And once I've confirmed the lights are still working, then I will use my hot glue gun to gently tack all of the lights into place and make sure that they stay connected to the foam of the blade. We're also going to cut out a round piece of the thick foam for the pommel. And you'll notice I've actually sandwiched a piece of thin EVA foam in between the pommel light and the pommel base. And the reason I've done that is because I'm going to cut a hole in the middle of this white thin foam. And that will let the light kind of shine through the hole to where it appears more circular when it's being shown. Then and it'll also kind of help to kind of filter the light out and filter it up into the pommel ball. So once my front blade lights are ready to go, I'm going to Dremel out any places that need to kind of be smoothed out on my base, on my foam base, before I attach the blade base to it using contact cement. I hot glued the LED lights for the pommel onto the pommel base before attaching the pommel base to the build base using contact cement. From here, I solder up my pommel base lights. I then wire up my rear blade light using the same exact technique that I used for the front blade light by wrapping the LEDs around and settling them into the grooves before hot gluing them down, after making sure that they're soldered and working correctly. Once all of the soldering is done, it's now a good time to test all of my lights to make sure that they work correctly together. And now it's time for a little break. Now that break time's over, it's time to start gluing our blade parts to our main body using contact cement. The lights for the blaster part of the blade at the very back will be one simple LED strip. And here is the pommel light with the circular cover that will help to kind of funnel the light up through to the green ball on top of the pommel. I've also cut out a very long rectangle part of thin foam so that I can use it to go around the edge of the pommel to give it a little bit of extra thickness, because we're going to wind up painting that later. So I'm going to connect this long rectangular edge to the circular part of the pommel edge, and that'll make sure that everything's kind of even for painting and give it a little bit more thickness. While I'm waiting for the contact cement on both sides of the edges to dry, I'm going to use my hot glue gun to go around the inner circle of this white foam, and I'm going to make sure I have a good coat of hot glue in there before I stick the green part or the light cover on top of it, right? So I want to put the light cover on top of it before I, attach the edge that we're going to be painting, because the green circle is going to sit in the middle of the pommel, right? Just like that. And now I'm going to attach our pommel edge that we'll be painting, just like so, around the circle. Once that's completed, I will hot glue the pommel ball on top of the pommel. And now the pommel is complete. Now it's time to attach our green blade edges to the base in order to cover up our lights and give the blade its nice green glow. Once again, we'll do a quick lighting test. We also use the same technique for the back blade. To get rid of the gap between the two lighting areas of our blades, we're simply going to use hot glue to kind of stick them together like so. So we'll start with the front blade, and I'm just going to get my hot glue gun, and I'm going to put a line of hot glue down on the bottom, and I'm going to stick the two together in order to kind of slowly form this up into a single edge. So now I'm going to take some of my white translucent foam, and we're going to actually cover the edge of this. One reason why we're doing this is to make this more kid friendly, because for most of my prototypes I like to make them to where like I build them and then like kids can kind of play with them, right? So this foam is actually soft, so if a kid gets bashed in the head with it, it's not going to do any damage, and they can get banged around. But another reason why I'm doing this, like I mentioned before, is to kind of filter the light, filter the green light and make it a lot softer. And the third reason I'm using this stuff is to kind of hide the places where the edges don't exactly meet on the plastic. To do that, I'm simply going to run a long line of hot glue down the center of the blade, which I will then cover with the translucent foam. At this point, I'm going to start forming the foam around the blade. Now keep in mind, I don't want the translucent foam to cover up all of the green. So I'm going to mark an area on the translucent foam that just kind of covers the edge or a little bit above the edge. And then we're going to cut that off using a pair of scissors. Now we're going to start forming the foam up even more around the edge, and then we're going to use hot glue to kind of pin it down in place. Alright, so once we've got the translucent foam on, this is kind of what our blade looks like right now, and we'll like clean that up a little bit. But you can see the wires running from each of the lights. And if you'll notice, we have cut out places for the battery and the switch. And our tail lights, our blaster lights are ready to be hooked up. So of course this would be a very good place for a light test. That was just the area for the battery to go in. And we're not going to use a 9-volt battery for this. I just use that for testing. Right, so this is what our build kind of looks like at the moment. So now we're going to take our layer of thin EVA foam and put it over the blade, being careful not to cover up the green lights. So try to focus on making these thin layers of foam as smooth as possible when you glue them on, and that way you don't have any rough spots that you'll need to like worry about trying to sand out before you start painting. And don't worry if the foam is a little bit too thick or too overlapping at the top or around the edges. You can always just cut that off, with a with your cutting tool, and make sure that it kind of fits the profile of the base. Next, you're going to cut out a thin 1/2 inch strip of thin foam to go around the base of the blade and kind of around the blaster area. And we're going to actually just paint on this to give it a little bit of extra like color and texture. So instead of using the contact cement, I just kind of used hot glue to glue this on. Make it easy and easy to adjust and kind of quick to put on. So you're just going to place this foam around the edge of the blaster area, and you want it to stick up a little bit above where the lights are, because we're going to be painting that area later, and we're going to do like a little bit of a cool effect using some of the other foam. So just kind of like this right here to where it sticks up a little bit. From there, you're going to grab another piece of thin foam and you're going to cut out a D-shaped ring to place on the bottom of the blaster. And that's going to kind of help us filter out the light a little bit. You're also going to cut out 2 little small strips of foam and place them at the end of the blaster just like this to give the bottom of the blaster a little bit more texture and a little bit more volume to it. You'll attach all of your new parts using hot glue just like so. And with that, the base of your foam build is practically complete. So you can check out the lighting and maybe adjust a few things. But this is kind of the standard of what we're looking for. And it's pretty lightweight and durable, so you can kind of play around with it and have fun. Before you take it out to paint, I recommend maybe getting some shots like this in, for the kids. And yeah, now we're ready to move on to the painting side. Now before we move on to the painting side, we want to make sure that we cover everything that we don't want to paint with masking tape. So if you'll notice, I've covered the front blade, the back blade, and the blaster area where the light is shining through, as well as the pommel with masking tape. Because we're going to be sealing this with a rubber spray, and we don't want any of that getting in. So now we're going to take our laser blades outside to a well-ventilated area and spray them with our rubber coating in order to get them prepared for painting. And this is kind of what they look like. I've put a few coats of this rubber coating on it in order to give it a nice matte black feel. And that also seals it and makes it a little bit more waterproof. Okay, so now that we have our laser blades built and coated with the matte black base, it's time to move on to the fun stuff, which will be painting, right? For these builds, I'll actually be using my airbrush setup. So I've got my compressor here, my airbrush pen, and these are the colors that I'll be using to kind of paint this. Because if you'll notice, the character right here, his blades are actually kind of green when they're glowing and kind of fade to black. So we'll be trying to replicate that as much as possible. But you don't need an airbrush system or anything expensive. You can do this with regular paints that you can get from your home center and stuff like that. So don't worry about it. You can even hand paint them if you want to. I'm just lazy and I like my airbrush, so I'm going to be using that. I'll go ahead and get set up and get this painting on these guys, and then we're almost done. Alright, so now that I have my airbrush set up, I'm going to go ahead and start painting the base, this middle green color, right? So we're going to go middle, and then I'm going to go a little bit darker towards this top area, and then I'll go a little bit more fluorescent green down at the bottom. And we'll see how that works out on this matte black, right? Great. So now I'm going to switch out to the darker color green for the top area. Right, and we're going to just be kind of going along the top of this laser blade with the darker green. And I might even fade that out to black later. Boom. Okay, here we go. Nice little contrast there. Okay, here we go. So now we're going to switch out to the light fluorescent green that I've got here to highlight the bottom. And that'll give us our 3 tones of green that we're going to be using for this project. And when it comes to airbrushing, don't worry if it comes out perfectly. A lot of times, because you can't really mess up with airbrush because you can always just kind of paint over stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with this one. The key I think is to just go ahead and start building, start painting, start trying to do stuff, and then your skills will naturally improve as you start doing it. So me, I'm
fairly new to cosplay. I build weapons, but I mainly just kind of did it for fun as a hobby. But I didn't really start building my own like characters' weapons until recently. So, you know, that involved a lot more because you have to think of the design and the layout and stuff like that. So it's actually pretty fun. But, you know, like you just have to kind of play around with it and kind of stick with it until you get the hang of it. Just around the blade edge with this light fluorescent green. Right, to give it a little bit more contrast. So basically I'm just kind of following the tape line with this. Right, so really kind of want to make that kind of stand out a little bit. We'll do a little bit on the top here. Yeah, to highlight that, you know, like maybe there's a bit of a cutting edge here as well. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what we're going for. Alright, so yeah, this is generally what our characters, the color of our characters' laser blades right now. I could expand that, but remember I still have this green, the tape covering the main green part, so I don't want to like overpaint it. The top I think could be a little bit darker, so I am going to add some black to this, and then I'm going to work on blending this all in. Okay, and the last airbrush color that I'm going to be using is going to be black here. And I want to do, when you're airbrushing, it's a good idea to go from light to dark because black tends to conquer all in a lot of cases. So I'm going to use this to like kind of fade out to the top part of the blades to make it kind of blend in more with the handle. So just kind of around this top edge. This top edge I might actually leave it green, but just around like this area right here. So quickly going to add that. And another reason I like airbrush is because, like I said, I like to keep my my cosplay props, my initial cosplay props, and my prototypes more kid friendly. So kids can actually grab this and run around with it and bang it. And because it's like non-toxic paint, it's like water-based acrylic. Then you know, it's not really going to do too much. We don't have to worry about paint chips or anything like that, or anything that's really going to damage them. Because kids are going to be banging these things up, you know, so you do want to keep your materials as like safe as possible, as kid-friendly as possible, and I recommend doing that for all of your prototypes. You know, and then once you get more advanced, or once you want to build like some real models with some like other like with some harder material, or heavier materials, then yeah, you can feel free to go crazy with that. But you know, for a prototype, you know, like having like building them for kids actually lets you kind of see how well they can actually work and how durable they're actually going to be, because kids are going to do crazy stuff with these things that adults naturally wouldn't, because we know how much work went into like preparing them. But yeah, this is kind of what I'm looking for the paint job right now. You know, like and I might even it out a little bit, or I might actually kind of leave it like this, a little bit like rugged. You know, because we're going to be adding the gold and the silver highlights to it, which will make it look better anyway. And then after we pull this paint off, or pull off this masking tape, that'll make that'll make a very big difference in the way that looks. Okay, so yeah, I think I'm pretty satisfied with this look right now. So I'm going to leave the airbrushing and the painting at that. At this point, I'm going to carefully remove the masking tape that I was using to cover the blades and the foam on the blade. You know, like I said, carefully, slowly, no need to rush this part. And this is what the blades look like with their base paint and the airbrush. Not too bad. Now we have to paint on the highlights, which we'll start doing here. So I'm going to use gold and silver powder paint for this. And I'm not going to really paint too much. I'm going to remove this masking tape area from around the handle and the base of the blade. And those are going to be the two main areas that we're going to wind up painting with these silver and gold paints. And, you know, in order to give it more of a kind of highlight around the blaster area and the pommel. I'm going to be using this metallic gold paint to go around the base of the blaster to give that more highlight. And I'm going to paint a gold band right there. I'm also going to paint around the pommel area with gold as well, in order to give that more highlight. Now, the official organization colors for the Red Dragon Clan in my book are maroon, red, and gold. But they like to use green for their weapons in order to, I guess, kind of strike terror into their targets before they cut them down. So these highlights will add a little bit more of the, you know, organization's colors to this weapon, and, you know, and give it a little bit more identity. So I'm just kind of lightly going over like some of the bottom areas here. If you'll notice, I'm kind of using the silver and gold, you know, to kind of offset each other.
And around the pommel area, I'm just going to paint that all gold right now. And you know, that'll also give a little bit more reflectivity to the green light when it comes out of the top, and make it look and give it kind of a nice effect. And this is what the blaster area kind of looks like. So I painted gold on the inside and put the 2 black bars out there to give it a little bit more texture. So that looks pretty nice to me. And that's basically it for the painting. For the pommel ball, I actually found that it had a hole in it, so I stuck some tissue paper inside of there, some napkins, just to filter out the light. Alright, so now that we have both of our blades painted, the base color, then we've already kind of airbrushed them to what we want them to look like, we're basically done with this build. The only thing that we really need to do is go ahead and cover the battery pack and make it to where it can kind of open and close. And to do that, all I've done is I've gotten some Velcro tape that's kind of sticky on both sides, and I wrapped the Velcro around the base right here, and stuck the other kind of fuzzy piece on top of here. And now I can just kind of open the battery pack whenever I need to easily change the batteries, right? So while I was testing these, I was actually using the 9-volt batteries here. But given the size of these props, and I didn't leave enough space for the battery to comfortably fit inside of here, so I decided to switch them out to these little smaller 12-volt batteries. And you can find these on Amazon usually. They're not as easily accessible as the 9 volts, but they are smaller, and they do require a bit of an adapter, which you can kind of see right here, which you can also order on Amazon at the same time. So we're going to be using these instead. And because they're smaller, they'll naturally fit more easily into the battery pack. So I'll go ahead and slide this guy in here and check my connection. And here you go. As you can see, we have glow on both of our props, and they're both lit up very brightly, and all of the lights appear to be working. Alright, and this is how you create your laser blade. And these are pretty durable, right? So I can beat on them and stuff like that, and it doesn't really do too much damage. So I'm just gonna hit these with a really light coat of this spray lacquer because I don't want them too shiny, just enough to kind of protect the paint. And like I said, you don't have to worry too much. You know, don't be too hard on yourself for your first cosplay prop build. You know, things might not work out exactly the way that you want them to, but you can always improve on it later. So you should just do this for fun and to get experience. And then once you get better at it, then your build will naturally become better anyway. And to give you an example of what I'm talking about, here are 2 of my previous builds. These are actually the first character props that I built, original character props that I built. I had built some Final Fantasy swords and stuff like that before, but these are the first ones that I can proudly say belong to my own original characters. But this is a more kid-friendly version, so my kid like to run around and bang on these. This one is a little bit more for adults. You got a nice glow here. So it's got a little bit more of a hard edge, and this one has a little bit more detail, and it's made out of Warblock, right? But from building these to going to these, this is a pretty big jump because there's actually a lot more electronics and lights in this one. So these were a little bit more of a complicated build, and I'm actually pretty happy with the way that they turned out. So like I said, don't judge yourself too harshly when you're first getting into this. Cosplay is supposed to be fun, and especially if you're building stuff for your own characters where you don't have any designs or references to kind of follow, you know, it can be a little bit more daunting, but that's part of the challenge. That's also part of the fun. So my advice is just to kind of have fun with it, enjoy what you're doing, and then try to improve as you continue to build. All right, and so I'm gonna let these guys dry, and once that's done, we are finished with this build. Right, and here is the final test to see if they light up. So here we go. There's blade number 1, and here is blade number 2. All right, so we have our working laser blades. Ta-da! Okay, all good here. Now all of the lights are working on these, as you can see. So let's see how bright they are when I turn the lights off. Oh. Pretty good, pretty good. All right, for something homemade, this is actually excellent. So that is it for this video. Now I really do hope that you'll find the information in this video to be very useful and helpful for marketing and advertising your own original comics, novels, games, or indie games, or whatever creative project that you're working on. And if you like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe,
check me out on Patreon. And also don't forget to stop by my Nerdy Urges online store where you can check out this really cool sweater and other WildFIRE and CDU LO related products and merch that I've been working on over the past couple of years. And I'll probably keep on making these cosplay videos as I continue to work on projects, because right now we're still in the process of making the Quest of the Gummy game, which you can play for free on itch.io at the link below. And there are a lot of cool weapons and armors and monsters that I kind of want to design from that. So I think I'm going to continue to build as I keep on making projects, just to improve my own skill and to see how many projects we can kind of complete within the next year. So that's it for this one. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them down in the comment section below, and I will see you all next time.